Hello, and welcome to the Coach Right podcast, where we explore how to turn coaching expertise into published pages. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, portfolio career specialist, author, and creator of Coach Right, the writing space and program specifically designed for coaches. You can get the episode show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachright.co.uk. It's time for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. Helen here, recording on Saturday, the 30th of May, 2026, and this is episode 24. Today's conversation with Phil Renshaw is a brilliant one. We explore coaching skills in non-coaching roles, integrating your book into your business, and the power of community. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. It never ceases to amaze me how many coaches who have tried writing in virtual sprints are surprised by the amount of words they get done. It's funny, isn't it? You open a video call. I use Teams, but other video call providers are available. You set an intention, you pop yourself on mute, and right away. It's the incredible power of community. I always forget that those other people are there. I always jump in my seat when the timer goes off, and I am always surprised by how many words I get done. In theory, it's no different to sitting at your computer typing away on your own, but yet somehow it is. I'm told by writer friends with ADHD that it's a form of body doubling, where simply having somebody else who is there, even when they're not actually helping you do what you're doing, somehow removes the distraction and increases focus. There's probably all sorts of science behind that, but I really like the idea that there is an inclusive side effect of our virtual sprints. And this is exactly what we do in Scribe Circle. 3 mornings a week, 7 till 8 a.m. We open up a call, set that intention, and write together. It's where our words happen. I adore it. It's the absolute best way to start the day. If you're interested in joining us, you are very welcome. You can opt in and out on a month-by-month basis as your schedule demands, all for less than the price of a coffee per session. Head over to coachright.co.uk/scribe circle and come along. In personal news, I got back from the Alhambra last week after 5 amazing days exploring the beautiful city of Granada. I spent a day touring the Alhambra itself, the palaces, the fort, the beautiful gardens, and the incredible scenery. I saw Sacromonte, the hillside where people lived in cave houses, and I explored Granada itself, its bazaars, cafes, and architecture. It was incredibly good for the creative soul, just to take a little bit of time out and refill that well. It's the ultimate artist's date, putting aside time just for me. And it always makes me laugh when you say that you're about to go on a solo trip and friends always say, "Why didn't you say? I would have come along too." And of course, that's the whole point of an artist date, is to protect that time alone. And it can be a few hours. It doesn't have to be a few days. I've heard it called alonement in the past, which I rather like, a way of describing time alone as positive solitude. Now, I tried really hard not to do any work. Of course, I did check a few emails and wrote a whole load of notes and ideas of things that I plan to bring to you in the future. But carving out that time in the diary to decompress was unsurprisingly food for the soul. Who would have thought that rest is good for us? And I brought the sunshine back with me to the UK. We have been experiencing a heat wave this week, with temperatures rising to around 35 degrees Celsius, which I think is approximately 95 in old money. For those of you that are based in countries where this is the norm, you're probably wondering what all the fuss is about. But believe me, our country was not designed for those temperatures. As I record this in the early morning, it's still relatively pleasant, but by midday, the house will be like a greenhouse and no amount of fan will make a difference. It's another year when I wonder whether it's time to invest in some air conditioning. But I didn't mention this to talk about the weather. Instead, I wanted to share that I've been reflecting on what happens to us when the weather gets hot, in that it makes us slow down. You simply can't rush around doing all of the jobs when it's 11 billion degrees in your spare room. Ask me how I know. So having a trip away, followed by a period of hot weather, really made me think about slowing down and prioritization, doing less and doing better. I came across the term psychologically unrushed this week, and I talked about that in my weekly newsletter to the community, which is completely free, by the way, and you're very welcome to sign up for. I'll pop the link in the show notes. Psychologically unrushed. Isn't that wonderful? I really love the idea of the mind slowing down. I talk about this in the Resilience book, that one of the challenges with modern ways of working and living is that we're constantly being pulled from one project to the next project with notifications and interruptions and lots of demands from other people. And taking some time to slow down, to do less things well, is good for the mind, it's good for the soul, and it's good for our productivity. In coaching news, CoachBot AI announced this week that they have appointed Jonathan Wrights as their first ever Chief Coaching Officer. Now, CoachBot AI is a fascinating organisation. If you haven't come across them before, they deploy AI coaching companions. Their differential is that they've been very clear right from the outset that to do this well, there needs to be ethical guardrails. What they say on their website is that their business model was built on ethical guardrails, ensuring that every interaction remains grounded in evidence and professional standards. So Jonathan has no easy task. He's been asked to shape coaching expertise into the product. He is going to be a very busy man. And what I think is important to note here is AI coaching is here. Regardless of how we feel about it, it's here and it's staying. What we need to do is prioritize making sure that the tools we're bringing to market are acting for good. And that's what I like about CoachBot AI. They're taking a stand and investing on exactly that point. I just read the article about Jonathan's appointment and then went out for a walk and listened to the Creative Penn podcast. The host, Joanna Penn, has been at the forefront of AI in the independent publishing space for some time. So it was a very neat segue to listen to the episode on Monday the 25th about accessibility and AI, where she was joined by Jeff Adams. Jeff is the author of a book called Content for Everyone, which is a must read for anyone who's wanting to make their website, newsletter, and social posts more accessible. This particular episode was exploring how AI can be used as an accessibility tool. They talked about the culture of shame when it comes to using AI as part of your creative process. And I think this is sometimes true across both authorship and coaching. I know I've said before that I made a conscious choice for my coaching to be 100% human. I believe it's important for psychological safety. And if a client of mine feels more comfortable with a session being recorded so they can have a transcript, that is absolutely okay with me. They also talked about how AI tools can reduce the physical and cognitive barriers for authors with disabilities, limited energy, and chronic pain. And it's so individual. They talked about how we all have our lived experience and we also all have our own perspective on these things and how important it is for us to make informed decisions that are relevant to us. They made a suggestion to create your own personal AI policy. Isn't that wonderful? So for me, that would mean a human coaching room. That would mean human creativity. And it would mean AI-assisted processes in terms of back office functions, editing support, imagery. But that's me. How about you? What would you put in your personal AI policy. Quite often when I'm talking to newer authors about accessibility, audio is the first thing that comes to mind. And there has been some news in the audio space this week. Spotify, who came in and disrupted the audiobook market a few years back, have announced that they're bringing in long-form magazine articles too. These will be narrated audio versions of journalism and is going to be available to their premium users as part of the monthly audio book allowance. They've also announced that there's going to be a new audiobook creation tool on the way. They've partnered with 11 Labs for AI narrated audiobooks. Now, these tools just keep getting better and better. And as somebody who has wanted to do audio for ages, I think this is really exciting. Human narration is wonderful and it's incredibly expensive and time consuming to produce. And that is a barrier to entry for many. This goes some way to removing that barrier. It's going to be invite only to start with and only for English language books by self-published authors. But my hope is that by the time the Resilience book is ready for publication, it will be more widely available and I can see whether it's an option for that book. Exciting times. Right, that is enough from me. Let's get into the interview with Phil. It's time for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. My guest today is Dr. Phil Renshaw. Phil spent 20 years in banking before the penny dropped and he realised that a singular focus on the numbers is not the route to business success. It's the people. In another lightbulb moment, Phil realised that teaching the skills of coaching to leaders and managers is wasting a huge amount of time and money because how they use their skills is not the same as a professional coach. They're coaching on the go. So Phil and his co-CEOs have written and published a book on exactly that topic, along with a brilliant accompanying tool. The book is aptly named Coaching on the Go, How to Lead Your Team Effectively in 10 Minutes a Day. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks very much, Helen. Thanks again for inviting me. As you know, I'm always enjoy talking about coaching.
Absolutely. I think we're going to have a brilliant conversation today. So if you can start by telling everyone a bit more about you and your path to publication.
Thanks, I will. So it's a bit of a story, but hopefully it's entertaining. And as you said, I worked for a long time in finance. I grew up wanting to be in finance. It's a bizarre thing to share, but I did as a young child. I wanted to be a banker. Who knows why? And I was a banker for about 10 years. And then I went to the corporate side. I was a treasurer, went on to run corporate finance, became a finance director. But basically, I'd been doing that for 25 years in that sort of almost stereotypical style of someone who believes the numbers are absolute truth and success is about driving the numbers and understanding the numbers. And then I was fortunate enough to have a couple of moments that are not for today's podcast probably, but personal events that led me to have, as you said, the penny dropped. I suddenly realized I'd got this very wrong. I hadn't noticed the importance of relationships, of leadership, of motivation, all of those sorts of things, and how significant they are to, successful businesses. And that was my big light bulb moment about 15 years ago now. I trained to be a professional coach. I started working in coaching predominantly as a coach, but I became more and more fascinated by how is it that people get to be, as I might say, so horribly senior without getting any of these skills, these fundamental leadership skills. And that's really what drove me forward into the business and where I am today.
Fantastic. And where did the book come in this story?
So, it was a gradual process. I became fascinated by this question of, how is this possible? And over time came to the view that what's happened is as a society, we've accidentally over-professionalized coaching, or perhaps a better way of putting it is the professionalization of coaching, which is a good thing, has led us to view coaching in that singular way, which leads people to teach coaching skills in that singular way and to treat it as a different thing. So this idea that, as professional coaches, we often say, remember to be clear about when you're coaching and not coaching. We talk about taking off the coaching hat often. However, that is also used in lots of coach training. And it does for the average manager, the average leader, ordinary people. And it's wrong. And research shows it's wrong because in their case, these are just leadership skills that they're using in the everyday moment. And it was as that, if you like, became clearer and clearer. That's what gave us the idea for the book. And also, I read a wonderful book, if you haven't come across it, which, if I get it right, is called A Peacock in the Land of Penguins. It's an old book, although I know it's the organization behind it is still, I think, very much alive in the US. So you have to sort of read it, recognizing when it was written slightly. But it's a parable, and it's a beautiful, simple way of getting across a message. And it was also that made us think, okay, we can do something with this as well to demonstrate that coaching skills are skills that you use on the go in the moment. And we need people to see that and feel comfortable that this is a straightforward idea that they can just bring into their everyday leadership. And actually, you mentioned our tool, which we'll come to. Part of that is demonstrating to people that they're already using coaching skills. They just perhaps haven't realized that that's what they are, and also hadn't realized their importance.
Yeah, absolutely. I reflect on when you do your coach training, there's quite a lot of conversation about the tripartite of trainer, coach, and mentor. And of course, you contract with your clients, and like you say, which hat you're going to be wearing. You might re-contract within a session. But having been a people leader for a couple of decades, you absolutely don't do that in a one-to-one with one of your direct reports, do you? Because actually they need you to be able to flex seamlessly between those three personas to support them as they need at that particular time. So yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah, essentially you're just being human. And when we talk to clients and train clients, that's often a phrase that comes up, or a version of those words. You're just drawing on skills that are just building the relationships of being human. And therefore you can't be forced into some process-led idea. And unfortunately, the way coaching is often taught to the ordinary person, rather than the person who wants to be a professional coach, teaches them it's a process. So they think the first thing I need to do is contract. And of course, that just throws the other person out if they're not expecting it. If it's just part of ordinary language and everyone's got comfortable with it, then it is. Because of course, one of the best examples of contracting is that idea that, when people come to you and say, have you just got 5 minutes? And then you're still talking 25 minutes later, right? And that's a great example of ordinary, everyday contracting skill. It's, in that sense, nothing to do with coaching. It just happens to overlap with coaching, right? But what's important is you notice it and you say, now, when you ask for 5 minutes, do you mean 5 minutes? That kind of thing. And then we just move from there.
Brilliant. And so you've got this concept of leading with a coaching style. How do you go from this concept that presumably is within your coaching practice and you're working with companies and individuals with this premise? How does that then become a book?
Yeah, so there's the story works the other way, because we basically, I met Jenny Robinson, who's my co-author of the book, doing our PhDs at Cranfield, and discovered that she had very similar views on the world of leadership and the world of coaching. And indeed, her PhD was explicitly in leadership, which is very helpful as well. So we weren't exploring the idea of a business at all. We simply said, I suggested, I've got this idea. I think there's a really useful book that will help people here. And I think it's saying something different. There are lots of books on coaching, and it's a tricky thing to be different. And he bought into the idea. She likes to sort of joke that when I suggested it to her, she thought I was nuts. Does he really mean this, that we're going to write a book together? And then she tells a story how I agreed because it sounded like a good idea. And then Phil just sent me a plan. And I'm like, oh my God, he means it. We are going to write a book. So, it was born out of the interest and the passion for the idea. We also had a possible advantage or disadvantage that we were both doing our PhDs at the time, which is something that's heavily around the topic of writing. To get a PhD, you have to do a lot of writing. You have to be published. You have to write in particular ways for particular audiences, and that requires a lot of practice, because it's not most people don't normally have that style of skill, unless they've already been academics, I suppose, but that's unlikely.
It's a particular tone of voice, isn't it?
That's right.
Academic
it is,
writing,
yeah. So, for me, the idea of writing the book I found completely liberating, because we were able to write it in our own voice rather
throw
than
all of those rules out of the
yeah,
window.
that's right. We didn't have to, somebody had a phrase which I'm afraid I've forgotten, and I need to go back to him, but he mentioned it a few weeks ago to me in conversation, that a PhD is several years of talking about what other people say until you're allowed to talk about what you think. You're not allowed to say what you think for a long time. Whereas here we were allowed to say what the hell we liked to a certain degree, because we'd persuaded a publisher that we had an idea. So I found it very easy to write. I think Jenny had a different style. Her style tends to be putting aside chunks of time in her day, and I'm going to write in that time. And sometimes, because it's a thing we did in the PhD world as well, we would work together with other people. So we would say, something like every Wednesday, 2:00 to 4:00, we all come together to write. And sometimes that was physically, but also sometimes just online. We would just open up a Zoom call, and then we'd all just sit and write. So we weren't talking, but we were using the Zoom call as a methodology of, I was going to say forcing us to write. Encouraging us is perhaps a better word, but giving us that sense of structure. Okay, I've committed to this, so I will write because I'm with other people who I write.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody understands the power of virtual writing sprints until they've attended them. I run sprints 3 mornings a week, and just today, somebody there wrote 1,000 words in 50 minutes, and it's just amazing, isn't it? And even though you can get up and go and get a cup of tea if you want to, and no one would know if you were doing something else because it's all virtual. It's just showing up and actually committing to the work. It's amazing the difference that it makes.
I think so. It works for a lot of people. I mean, I personally don't find that need, that it doesn't make much of a difference to me, but I definitely find a lot of other people do. And that's great. It's a really sensible, clever way of encouraging yourself. I mean, the other thing that was an advantage for Jenny and I, and can often be an advantage in academic publishing as well, is because you're writing with somebody else, that acts as a foil both to encourage you, but also to learn. I mean, we learned loads about coaching simply by writing the book together, because we discovered we had different opinions on things, explored the opinions, and then found, maybe we don't have different opinions, that kind of idea. So very occasionally in our book, we do say things like, Jenny thinks this and Phil thinks that. Very occasionally we do that. Most of the time we don't. But nonetheless, having someone to write with, at least for us, was very successful. I do know, though, that, of course, it's not always that way. I mean, I've written academic papers with other people where the balance has not been right, and it's been very, upsetting, negative, and indeed once or twice failed because you just don't have that right relationship with somebody else as an author, whatever that might mean. Volumes of words, or timeliness to generate it, or just the way people give each other feedback. We've all got our own style, and some people can't, struggle to adjust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know people, so again, there's so much that you've just said there that I wanted to loop back on so I can try and remember everything. So let's talk about co-writing first of all, because I know a lot of people find the idea of writing with somebody else very appealing for a lot of the reasons that you've just talked about. You have a shared interest, you have motivation, you have strengths that complement each other, and so on and so forth. The questions that I always get asked are, then how does that particularly work? So you're the one that's gone, Jenny, we should write a book about this. And she's gone, all right, Phil. And then you created a plan. How did that plan then become the finished product with the two of you working together?
So there's an interesting thing, because we also did what is normally discouraged, at least I understand to be discouraged. Actually, you might know more. We actually wrote the book before we went to a publisher, knowing that you shouldn't do that, knowing that the publisher isn't going to read the book. Part of the reason we did that, or a strong reason we did that, is we were aiming on a very short book. Now, as it turns out, the book is longer than we were aiming for, because that was a request of the publisher. But when we first wrote it, it was deliberately short. I honestly can't remember now, but let's say 25,000 words. So, it was in the style of a parable. That's why it was also shorter. So it had an introduction, but then a parable. And we felt that because we knew we were doing something shorter, writing the book would give us lots of insights and knowledge about what we were pitching, what we were trying to write. So yeah, we basically, with that in mind, created a structure with a program of targets, a couple of chapters a month type thing. I can't remember exactly, and a deadline. We are both people that work to deadlines. We enjoy that sort of impact without it being a concern. I mean, we didn't set a daft deadline. I don't mean it in that sense, but nonetheless a clear process. And then, we're simply working through it, but recognizing that I'm sure at times we didn't meet the deadlines we'd set, but you build understanding and awareness and openness to share, what you can and can't do. And just followed it from that, I think, in a structuring way. I mean, the value of everything today being digital means that, you'd often write something for a chapter and then Jenny would say, I think that's in the wrong chapter. And you'd go, oh, I see what you mean. But you could just move the text somewhere and save it until later. You can do those sorts of things, which are, of course, an advantage. So, it, knowing that when you've written something, if it's not quite right yet, it's still worth saving because it might apply somewhere else, is a useful approach. But for us, it was, fairly straightforward, I think, in, the timetables, the structure, writing it, so that we were then in a position to pitch to a publisher.
To the publisher. So very I can't get my words out. Methodical.
Yeah.
From the sounds of it, like a sort of semi-structure from the terms of the book itself, but also how you delivered that work.
I think so. I mean, it still allowed for the fact that I'm pretty confident that whatever the first list of expected chapter headings was, it definitely wasn't the final list of chapter headings, undoubtedly.
It never is.
Right. Then moved into a completely different order and new chapters. You think of different things as you go along. And, indeed, we, as you mentioned at the beginning, our book has morphed into our business, and we've developed a profiling tool that assesses or profiles how often you use the skills of coaching. And I think if that tool had come at the same time as the book, we'd have probably written the book in a different way. The tool came second. So we'd done more research rather than writing, in a sense, what we thought based on limited research. And so that came into the tool, which we call our Gizmo for people listening to Gizmo tool. If and when we do a second issue of our book, it would probably have more chapters, because although all the content is in there somewhere, it's not easy to say, chapter 1 talks to skill 1, chapter 2 talks to skill 2. It's not judged that way. So on occasions we have to say, when you're looking at the skill of, I don't know, contracting, you have to read chapters 1 and page 67 to 93. That kind of thing is required.
And it's funny, isn't it, when it comes to alignment with programs or offerings with books, there is that kind of, you either do the book first and then you do the offering, or you do it the other way around. And whichever way around you do it, there will always be synergies and lack thereof that need to be addressed in a certain way. It's
definitely
the evolution of the thinking, isn't it?
It is. And I suspect, although I don't know, that if you were self-published, it might be easier, because you could probably just go back and change your book in a more straightforward fashion. Whereas we're published by Pearson, which means that we'd have to be persuading them of investing more money to want to do that. And at this stage, we are not, we're not trying to pursue that particular argument.
No, I think that's probably not energy to use, to be fair. And you are right. Perceived wisdom is to do the pitch to the publisher before you write the book. But tell us about your relationship with the publisher and how that all came to be.
I mean, our book was published back in 2019, so things may have changed a little bit. But at that time, I knew from family connections in the publishing industry that if you searched around the big publishers, you would find guidance on how they wanted you to pitch your ideas to them. Of course, annoyingly, every publisher had a slightly different way of wanting that information.
Of course they do.
But nonetheless, in those days, it was very clear how they wanted the information. And as we were in the PhD structured environment, having to meet guidelines all the time, we simply created a pitch document to match what they were asking for. And we just approached one at a time. Major publishers, I don't remember where we started. Pearson wasn't the first one. It was maybe fourth or fifth. The other publishers basically turned us down for the fact that we were basing the book around a parable with pictures in it. So the first reasons given were, that's just not in our structure, even though on their websites it suggested otherwise, for example. And indeed, one of the publishers explicitly told us to go to another publisher that did this type of book. And when we went to that publisher, they said, no, they don't do that type of book.
Yes, they did.
It's just slightly annoying having filled out their pitch document process. But yeah, basically following it and knowing that, the key driver then, and I'm sure even more so today, was they basically want to know that you can sell the book, that you will be out there. Either it's part of your business, which is what became for us. When we wrote it, it was more to do with our academic profile and working in universities and teaching, that where we thought we'd be using the book. That may or may not have happened, but sort of COVID got in the way just immediately after we published. So it changed all the plans we had, and we went off in different directions. But as I say, that's still critical to the publishers. We were pretty convinced that we wanted the value of having a known publisher, that would make a difference. And it's definitely made a difference in terms of managing our business, because now as part of our business, it's built around the Gizmo profiling tool and the book around which we build leadership development programs that we deliver directly, and also partners who use the tool do as well. And the advantage of having Pearson is that if we need to get 50 books to Singapore, they can get 50 books to Singapore. And when they get stuck in customs, they did actually, they can get them out again, right? Whereas I remember early on, I wonder what country it was, very early on, I think it was Indonesia, where we were sending maybe 30 books. And I was sent something in Indonesian, which there was more than one language actually, so I can't remember which language, but in Indonesian, which was clearly from the customs, but I didn't understand a word it said. I had no idea what this document meant. But luckily, I realised, well, I just sent it to Pearson, and they went, aha.
And deal with this, please.
They dealt with it. So obviously it depends on what you're aiming to do, because people can, Amazon's the world over, etc. So that way of getting books. But when you're trying to get volume in front of customers and post them around the world, there's a big advantage of having it seems to me there's a big advantage anyway of having a publisher like Pearson.
And I think people are often interested in how the book integrates into a coaching business, because again, there's that sort of almost how can you revenue generate from your book?
Yeah.
How can you get your book into the hands of readers? And then how does your business model sit with this book as part of it? So because the book came first and then the tool came, how did that journey from book to business with tool? And do tell us more about Gizmo as well, because it is very cool.
Thank you. Well, as I say, the sort of plan in the sense of a business plan, we didn't write the book with a business in mind, but we started working more and more with the ideas of it within our university work as lecturers, effectively, or workshop executive education type work. Then COVID came along, so we ultimately it led us into working more and more together, and so we realized we had something different. Let's set up the business, Coaching on the Go. A professor at our university said, the book's great, love what you're bringing here. You're bringing people's attention to this different way of thinking. But if you really want to have impact, you need to do something else. That's what led us to the profiling tool of the Gizmo. So where we've ended up, to answer your question, I guess there's probably two elements. So one element is that the book is, we know, on quite a few university course lists, whether that's through us directly or indirectly. We don't deliver those sorts of things anymore unless it's through our business. So that does sometimes happen through our business. More often it happens because we've got partners using the tool and the book. But to bring it into our business, well, the tool is the piece that drives it all, because what the tool does is allows the participant to see how often they're using the skills of what we call a leader who coaches. So critical to this is the idea that coaching isn't separate to leadership. So when people talk about a coaching style of leadership, we say that's wrong. Now, it depends on the client whether I'd say that to the client's face that it's wrong, of course, right? I might use different words, but it's wrong in the sense that our research, other research, and clients always end up agreeing as well. When you look at the basic skills that make up coaching, they are leadership skills, so much so that if you weren't doing them, then you're not doing leadership. Now, you might be in charge, right? So you are still a leader in that sense. Everyone's a leader. But you may be a dictator, or you may be a toxic leader. You're not doing the positive thing that's considered leadership. And so our tool allows you to see how much you're using these coaching skills. And it turns out and we didn't do it on purpose, but it turns out there's no other tool in the world that does this, probably because people think of coaching as this separate process. And so in the same way as you or I were taught to be professional coaches, you are watched. That's how people assess whether you can coach or not. They watch you, or they watch a video, or they listen to a recording. But if you see these skills of a leader who coaches as just wrapped into leadership, you can't watch because there's too many other things going on to know whether now is the right time to ask a great question or tell someone what to do. You couldn't know that. And the tool has turned out to, be very powerful in drawing people's attention to this idea that coaching is something you're just doing on the go within your leadership. And that's what allows us to get in front of customers and to persuade other people to use the tool in their work, because of its uniqueness. And the tool and the book go hand in hand, because the tool is saying, here are some ideas. There's a report that's produced from the Gizmo tool. The report works like many a profiling tool, like a psychometric tool. Gives you ideas of how to build your skills, and then cross refers to the book to give you more ideas, to give you some more in-depth discussion if you need it, and reference. So it works as a supporting tool to everything that we do. And we also like to say there's layers to this. We sort of say, if you've got no budget, just buy the book. It's 10 or 12 quid. You'll find that. It'll help you on your own. If you've got more budget, get the book and get the tool. It's written in a way that the report is entirely usable. You don't need a professional coach. You don't need a professional facilitator to help you. They will add value, definitely, but you don't need it. And so then we say, of course, if you have more budget, then that's when you should use the tool and the book with a professional coach or with a facilitator, and that will help you develop your skills all the more. So yeah, the book is now a core, cornerstone of our business. The only funny thing really is that the book and the business is called Coaching on the Go. Arguably, we're doing leadership on the go. And this sometimes creates a bit of a disconnect in people's minds. But to us in the long run, we think that's helpful, because we're saying, look, that's why these skills are so powerful. That's why professional coaching is so powerful. It's coming out of the same idea. We think we're, democratizing coaching. That's a word someone used the other week, because we're trying to say pretty much everyone can develop these skills, and it would be better if they did. Sure, we'll still benefit from professional coaches. They have a different perspective. It's their profession. The boundaries are different. But we'd be better off if we can get more leadership, better leadership.
Yeah. There's so much in there, isn't there? From days in corporate, it's almost like you don't have to choose between coaching capability and not coaching capability. You can blend the two to become a better leader. And I also just, again, with business hat on, just really like the fact that you've integrated these pieces together. So, you say when you published your book, it was 2019, like it's forever ago. But of course, a book doesn't go off.
Yeah.
And so because you've integrated it into a tool that is ironically supported by numbers, which did occur to me.
That's true.
Which is just brilliant, bringing your two sides together. And then that obviously will evolve as organisations evolve.
Yeah.
It's a really smart way of giving the book a long tail sales process while still being very values led, because of this proposition that you have.
Yeah. Well, that's the hope. That's what we're seeking to do. And it's, we're very passionate about it, as most people are in coaching, but we're particularly passionate about this, this angle of helping everybody else to coach. And in fact, a client, I say a client, it would be a client of ours, but someone who would use the tool in their training business, a big organization, said yesterday that they're noticing growing negativity around psychometrics because it's judgmental, because people feel they're judged. Sorry, it isn't meant to be judgmental, but people feel that they're judged, feel that they, are they green? Are they yellow? Are they blue? Those sorts of things, the letters, that people are getting a little tired of them. So tools like ours, which are trying to be simpler and say, you may be good at this, you may be bad at this, but this is telling us how often you do it. And the question is, would it be better to do it more? And it might be, and it might not be. That's okay. But the point is to explore that. You can develop a skill and get better at it. And it seems to give more freedom as well. So we don't do the strengths and weaknesses thing, which again has its place. But the downside of it is that sense of creating boundaries for you. Whereas we're saying everyone can be better at these. Everyone doesn't, even the 18-year-old. We don't go below that only because our research isn't in the place of children. It's in the workplace, right? But logically, it would be exactly the same in children as well. And certainly we've got success using the tool and the book, we're told, in education, so universities, but I mean schools. And we've had some good feedback from, in fact, one of our partners, we call them co-pilots, one of our partners yesterday said that a particular client of his, which is a school, that the teachers are loving it. And he said, well, they do love a good book, don't they?
Yes, we want our teachers to love books. We want everyone to love good books.
Yeah.
So you have gone through this whole process, and I'm sure you learn lots of lessons along the way. So for anyone that's listening going, I'd like to write a book, what wisdom would you impart on them?
I think it's probably working out, what's behind your desire and how do you frame that. Certainly Jenny and I, when we were writing ours, we were very much had in the forefront that we're going to enjoy writing this, we're going to learn from writing this, and we hope people buy it, but if they don't, it doesn't matter. Right? That was, and if your framing is it does matter, for sake of argument, for your business, your intention with the business, or because it matters as that dreadfully used phrase, a vanity project, but we're all vain. That's perfectly human, right? For that to be the case, then acknowledge what that is. To yourself. You may not say that to a publisher or somebody else, but acknowledge for yourself what is the driver, what do you hope to gain from it? Because I think that helps. It sort of keeps you stable and honest to yourself as to what you're trying to achieve. Because it's definitely tough in the sense of whether people will read your book. That is definitely tough. And I don't think there's any, unless you're already a world famous celebrity,
Yeah.
then there's no way I think you could predict whether it would be read or not read. So very difficult. Even the titles of books, right, are difficult. Shared with me a couple of weeks ago, I won't say it because for obvious reasons, but the title of the book that he had come up with, and it was an absolutely brilliant title, really loved the title, really clever. He's found a publisher, and the publisher has said no, because when you do that old Ronseal test, people won't know what it is. And the reason that's important is because books are chosen by internet searches today, and they won't be searching for that title. It's a metaphorical title, you see, so they won't find your book.
Yeah.
And he said, isn't that interesting? Whereas, of course, it had, if the individual was already some sort of celebrity or had some sort of following, then the metaphorical title would work brilliantly.
Titling books and actually discoverability generally from a digital perspective, it is such an interesting area. So when you talked about your book title and maybe you'd have put leadership in, actually from an SEO perspective, you've got coaching and lead and team and effective all in that title and subtitle, and subtitles are such a gift, aren't they?
No, that's absolutely right. And Pearson guided us in that way exactly as you're describing. And indeed, although it's nothing to do with what we've just said, but the title of the book was different originally, and it was Pearson that said, I'm not sure you've quite cracked that. Have another think. Yeah. And we came to this better title. So yes, you're right from that search engine thing. I mean, I think it strikes me as it's sort of logical, but less so perhaps in the world of coaching, because, if you just search coaching or you just search leadership, you'll get 14 billion responses around you. So it needs to be a bit more than that. But nonetheless, that does seem to be the guiding point being made. And as you say, using the subtitle is definitely an opportunity. And I suspect with the story I just gave, that's the way the individual will probably do it. So the title of the book will perhaps be more, what would you say, mainstream is a better word, but the subtitle is the thing that will be the attractive hook, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an art in its own right, and there's certain parts of the book that do take a lot longer to do than you think they're going to. So like you say, choosing the title, writing the foreword, your acknowledgements. Oh my goodness, no one ever tells you how long it's going to take to write acknowledgements.
Yeah. We did a fun thing for that, writing your own profile at the beginning, which has actually turned out to be something we use in our leadership workshops.
Yeah.
Basically, we were having a laugh about how embarrassing it is to write that bit that goes at the front of your book.
Mm,
And so we came up with the idea of writing each other's.
nice.
And the thing that's funny about that is when you write each other's, you discover that people have a very different understanding of you than you do, even though
Yes.
it's all come from what you've said. So they write different things. I mean, there were a couple of things where we went, oh, that's not even true. You've written that about me and it's not true. And yet you obviously think it's true because of something I said. That's fascinating. And obviously, if you're publishing on your own, you can't quite do that trick. But I reckon you could ask somebody else
I think you
to
could
do the
ask
same
somebody.
trick.
Yeah,
Ask
or
somebody
another writer friend.
That's right. What would you write about me that goes there? And I think that could be really insightful. And it also makes you feel more comfortable, rather than being embarrassed by what's written.
Yes, it is one of the most painful things to write. And of course, as you say, if you need to do more than one of them, it's one of the things you tinker with forevermore. Like I'm constantly changing my about page and I'm just like, oh, it's so frustrating. But
Definitely.
So what surprised you throughout the process?
What surprised me? Probably what I said earlier of learning so much about coaching through writing it with Jenny. I mean, that might happen if you're on your own as well, I suspect, because you need to do research to write your own book.
It's a great excuse to read loads of books about a topic that interests you, isn't it?
Yeah,
writing a book.
Yeah, it is, yeah. So I think that's probably what it was. I mean, surprise could almost sound a bit egotistical. I don't mean it in the sense that, oh, gosh, it turned out I was wrong. That kind of, I'm so clever. Oh, no, I'm not. I didn't mean it quite like that. But the idea that you think I thought it was simple. Do you know what I mean? I thought it was straightforward, and it turned out that when we wrote the book, it's this stuff isn't as straightforward as I thought it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing ever is. But there we go.
Yeah. So that learning piece.
Absolutely. Phil, thank you so much. That's been incredibly insightful. It's been a fascinating exploration into your career pivots and then how the book and the services that you provide today has come about. Can you share with listeners where they can find you, your services and your book?
Of course. So the company is Coaching on the Go. So you will find us with the website, www.coachingonthego.co.uk. You will find us the book is in all the usual places online, whether that be Pearson's own website or Amazon or, all of the many different bookstores, UK, US, around the world. And you will find us just simply with Phil at coachingonthego.co.uk. And we'd love to talk to anyone who's interested in this stuff. Part of our whole business approach is that we're creating a community of people who are passionate about the same idea. Let's support each other, particularly as authors. It can be sometimes lonely. So, creating a community is a good thing.
We say community is the secret sauce when it comes to writing. And I think the same is true in coaching. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed talking to you today.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Helen.
I had such a brilliant time talking with Phil. He's so passionate about his topic, and I just love the fact he has a tool, a book, and a business that all integrate together around something he is absolutely passionate about delivering. That really comes across when you speak to him. Next week, I'm bringing you an episode of The Footnotes, and it's another question that I get asked all the time, and one that's particularly relevant to the conversation that we had today. Next week, I'll be talking all about how to write a book that aligns with your signature program. I'll see you on Wednesday for the next chapter.
Thank you for joining me today. You can get the show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachwrite.co.uk. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Your words can make a difference. A review can too. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, O'Neill Helen, that's O'Neill, Oneill, or on Instagram at coach_right. I'll see you for the next chapter of Coach Right.